Hang on one second. I'm having had some weird echo stuff going on. I was trying to resolve. I think I did it. So, how is everybody doing today? I hope you're doing well. I'm doing well. Um, we got a whoops. See there. Okay, so I guess I had a. It was the Instagram feed for some reason was giving me this echo. So I guess we're not going to do the Instagram feed today. Sorry, Instagram. Um, I don't know why it was doing that. It's never done that before. Any hoosers. Um, Let me do one more thing here. Sorry about all the chaos and confusion as I get going. Ah, telling you, if I had money, I would have a producer and take care of all this stuff for me. But I'm a one man operation and I'm not very good at it. But anyway, uh, all right, we're getting better. I just, every once in a while, flub. But okay, so the Supreme Court had some new rulings today, and I think we've got some great conversations to have today about those rulings. And I'm really interested in what some of y'all have to say. Hi, Harry. How you doing? Harry says hello. So, um, it's cool how you get to like start to know some viewers after a while. So the Supreme Court came down with some decisions today and some really interesting ones. Of course, the headliner is that Donald Trump can't amend the Constitution just by saying so. So big win for birthright citizenship. Walter says heat wave. Where are you at, Walter? Where is it hot? I'm just like I'm in Texas, man. It's like hot every day here. Can I just say good on the Supreme Court for its ruling on the issue of illegal immigrants' birthright citizenship? Yes, you can. And this was I was worried that it might not work, might not go through. It shouldn't have ever even been heard. The uh, that it was just it's plainly obvious from the text of the Constitution. And for those that don't know, or those who might be fooled by the Republican talking point on this, the whole thing, the Constitution says that if you're born here and your parents are well, let me read uh, the exact text of the amendment. Says usually all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Okay. So now what happened is it was plainly obvious not only from the actual text but also from the debates that were had at the time what they meant by subject to the jurisdiction thereof. There were some people and still are some people that are not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. Those are the children of diplomats that have diplomatic immunity. And that is what it was being referring to. It was not referring to, some mythical thing where people were like, they were here, but they weren't sovereign and they weren't diplomats. There was no immigration law at the time. So if you were here legally, period. And so now they're like, well, there's no oath or, like these people that come over and they're here legally, they can still be loyal to other countries. If somebody came over from Ireland in 68 and had kids here, there was no like oath of loyalty they had to take before their kids could be citizens. It's not this whole Republican talking point invents this whole new category of people that did not exist. And not only did they, like invent this category of people, they tried to invent this idea that that's what the people meant when they wrote under the sovereignty thereof. Like, they didn't go into the waiting room and say, yeah, we need you to take this oath and swear fealty or else your kid's not a citizen. This is a made up thing. This is an entirely fictional thing from the Republicans. And the Constitution is really clear. The other, because it says if you're born here and subject to the sovereignty, then you're a citizen, right? If you're not subject to the sovereignty, how can you be breaking the law, right? If you're not subject to the law, how can you break the law? If they're not subject to the law, how can you say they are here illegally? Doesn't mean not being subject to the law doesn't mean that you're breaking the law. Prisoners broke the law, but they were subject to it. That's why they are in prison. It is the most backwards thing that it is the dumbest talking point from the right. And there is a lot of competition for stupid talking points. But this one is just grade A, cream of the crop, dumb. And that's the Supreme Court decided, yeah, that makes sense to me. And they heard it. And 5 of them agree that it doesn't say exactly what it says. And these are the people that insist they are textualists. Now, the decision was 6-3 because Kavanaugh said, well, I want to overturn it for different reasons. The Constitution is okay, but it goes against federal law. Look, this was originally decided in, I can't remember, something versus Wong, maybe. It was about a Chinese, the child of Chinese immigrants that were here illegally, because it was the first law where people could be, where the first law where there was illegal immigrants. They never brought up this whole thing about, well, these parents weren't, under subject to law. That was all nonsense. They said she was a citizen. Their daughter was a citizen. So, end of story. But anyway, at least it won, right? Thank you, John Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett, for at least, for 5 minutes pretending like the Constitution still matters. The rest of them can go fornicate themselves. So, yes, you can say that. I 100% agree, Harry. Good on the Supreme Court, or at least the ones that, read the Constitution. So Walter's in Philadelphia. So, all right, Walter, I got one question for you. Where is the best place to get a Philly cheesesteak? And the other big ruling today is obviously the culture war of the Republican Party when it comes to transgender athletes in sports. The court has upheld the ban on such things. This is a little more complicated. I think what's worse than the ruling itself is the language Clarence Thomas used in it that basically denies the existence of trans people. I think there are, I don't agree with the concerns, but I think they are honest concerns about, transgender women competing in sports. There are very few of them. I don't think we need to be making federal laws about it. I don't think the Supreme Court needs to be hearing cases about it. I just think that there is an honest reason that some people don't feel that way. My wife was a college athlete. She actually was a Division II diver. She just barely missed going to nationals. So she's the athlete in the family, and she struggles with it, even though she has a transgender nephew. I think that there is real concerns about that, and while I disagree with those concerns, I think those concerns are honest. I do not think the way that Clarence Thomas addressed those concerns was decent, and not even I think it was Sotomayor kind of tore him apart, as much as can be done when she was writing about, you know, whatever your position is. I think, we can agree that both sides, deserve to be treated with human decency. Also, the mail-in ballot ruling was yesterday, and we talked about that yesterday. The other big ruling, though, today that I think is actually really, really important is the ruling about the funding, the campaign finance funding. Now parties can give candidates, the funding that they couldn't give before. This overturns decades of precedent. And what I find really interesting about this is I understand people that are like third party, or think that the two-party system sucks, or have issues with that. But I always also say we also live in that society. Like, this is a reality that we exist in. And just, I'm going to take my bat and ball and go home does not change the game. It doesn't make the rules any different. And so what happens is you look at Al Gore, without getting into the whole thing about whether he should have, stepped aside or not, he barely lost because these Ralph Nader voters that were like, refused to choose between the lesser of two evils, and there's no difference between the parties or whatever. All right. Then you had, so Bush won in 2000 because of them. In 2004, he won re-election. He wouldn't have won re-election if he hadn't won the election in the first place. And then you had Obama for 8 years, and then you had Bush won, or Trump won. And then you had Kavanaugh, Barrett, and what's his name? Anyway, he had 3. So you have, of the 6 Supreme Court justices that are conservative, 5 of them were named by presidents who lost the popular vote in their first term. There wouldn't be a second term of Trump if there wasn't a first term of Trump. I can tell you that. So you got 6 of these justices, 6 of them that were named by Republicans, and these are the 6, or 5 of the 6 were named by I'm sorry, 4 of the 6. I'm getting I think Alito was named by Bush, if I'm remembering right. Thomas was named by Bush's dad. So the bottom line is the Supreme Court is a minority Supreme Court for a reason. And when you are not playing chess, when you're not thinking of your end game, when you're not thinking of the consequences of staying home, when you're worried about not voting for the lesser of two evils and the greater of two evils wins, the greater of two evil happens. And you don't need to endorse the lesser of two evils like that, like that. You're not endorsing the lesser of two evils. You're negating the greater of two evils. And whether you think that choice is fair or not is kind of irrelevant to the outcome. And we have to look at the outcome. And what I think is really interesting today is, with this election, it reinforces the two-party system. So the very thing which you are against, you caused. Like, it is the two-party system has been reinforced because of people that refuse to engage in the two-party system. So it's not about, I'm not trying to get into a blame game or anything. Understand me right. I am just trying to wonder, have you thought about the end game? This is the thing I always wonder. What is your end game? I personally am not a fan of the two-party system. I have a lot of issues with the Democratic Party. I definitely align more with AOC than Joe Biden. you know. But I also have a 58-year-old man who saw what happened when I was growing up with Nixon and Ford and Reagan and Bush and only having 4 years of the presidency over like a 20-year period and seeing how much damage that occurs to the country. So I was willing to go for a moderate Democratic candidate just to soften the damage the Republicans were doing. Doesn't mean that I, was 100% on board with every single aspect of Clinton. If in a democracy, you're going to disagree with some things of both sides, no matter what. But the lesser of two evils, and I mean, the whole lesser of two evils thing also implies everything is evil. And it's not always just evil. Some of it's just not everything you want. Anyway, the result now is that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are now stronger than they've ever been. So good on you. Hey, Brett, how's it going? I think this one is the whole thing about the campaign finance reform. That's going to be, kind of playing second fiddle to the birthright citizenship thing. But I think that is actually going to be the more lasting effect. Someone trolled Trump like 30 other countries have similar laws on birth. Yeah, I'm imagining Trump called it fake news. It's a record for the Supreme Court to common sense rulings in a day when they have said that mail-in ballots that arrived late are valid to be counted in re-elections. Yes. And this is just the space-time continuum exists. If you have an envelope stamped before election day or on election day, you voted on or before election day. I don't understand why anybody has a problem with that. I don't. They're like, well, it needs to be counted the same day. Why? Why? What's going to happen? The country's going to burn down? What's going to happen if it's counted the next day? What is the harm? There is none. Cindy says, I'm from America and I'm completely disappointed and I'm disgusted. I'm ashamed of the people we have in our Supreme Court system. It's just, they're textualists when it comes to some things, right? But when it comes to Dobbs, they're sitting there quoting a witch hunter from 1600. When it comes to the birthright citizenship, you got some of them that are just blithely ignoring what the Constitution actually says and what it actually means. They're spin doctors, not textualists. And not to mention, like the whole textualism thing, sometimes the founding fathers were wrong about things. It's just a thought. So if they thought something that's not in the Constitution, we don't need to pretend it is. Supreme Court is a mixed bag. The politics should not matter. It shouldn't matter. And generally speaking, well, I don't know if it's always been that way. We've always pretended it's not, but it kind of always has been that way. Like Dred Scott was just a absolutely political decision. I think that was it Pete Buttigieg that's like basically saying that the Democrats need to run on overhauling the Supreme Court and adding more seats. He's just openly saying we need to stack the Supreme Court. And by stack, we mean unstack. Right now, it is stacked. 2/3 of the Supreme Court represents 1/3 of America. That is a stacked court. Anchor babies. Anchor babies. What is an anchor baby? What is an anchor baby? I have a feeling you say a lot of racist things and then wonder why people call you a racist. My dad's from Ireland, and it makes me think about my dad. He's Irish, but he would be rolling over in his grave. Technically, Trump is an anchor baby. His mother lied on the census, and said she was a U.S. citizen. She was actually a Scottish citizen. His dad was a citizen. I know that there's a lot of people that point out that, like, all but one of Donald Trump's kids were children of immigrants, and that Donald Trump was a child of an immigrant. But his reform is that both parents are non-citizens. If both your parents are non-citizens and here illegally, then you can't be a citizen, according to Trump. But that's not according to the Constitution. But just if we're gonna say Trump's an idiot, we got to be honest about his idiocy. And so he would still be a citizen by his own reckoning. Probably that's why he says that. If it weren't for his mom, he probably would say both parents need to be citizens. By the way, did you see Stephen Miller's rant on all of this? I mean, that man is completely unhinged. And so I would just like to remind you, in case you have forgotten, that Stephen Miller was cut by an African immigrant. I'm not making that up. Stephen Miller is a cuck. His wife had a dalliance with an African immigrant by the name of Elon Musk. If the bots and trolls come to comments, but they can't swim the ocean to come to America's 250. 10 people. But the only thing I want to see is that I agree with you on a few points, but I do not think that we owe them anything because they chose to come across the borders illegally. Okay. I think this is one of the things where we need to be clear. We're not talking about the parents here. We're talking about the child. A child born here by illegal immigrants, and a child born here by legal immigrants, and a child born here by, parents that go back to I've got both sides of my family go all the way back to before the revolution. My roots go way back. And you know what? I did exactly the same thing to be born here as the child of two undocumented immigrants. I just got born here. It's not like an achievement. It's not like I did something. And it's not like they did something wrong. So I think that if a child is born here, they're a citizen, regardless of whether their parents broke the law or not. The sins of the father shouldn't be visited on the son. That's the Bible. For not for you, Cindy, but for all the so-called Christians, right? Doesn't it say that? Doesn't it say that not to visit the sins of the father on the children? Botsing Thin keeps popping in my head. That name sounds familiar, but I can't place it. Also, tell him to stop popping in your head. Is he like never mind. I imagined him, like popping. All right. I don't know what kind of music he was listening to while he was popping in your head. But oh, by the way, hello. Hello, let's mow the lawn together. Another regular. Perhaps the Indians of Massachusetts should have stood at Plymouth Rock and lectured pilgrims on immigration policy. Amy Trader Barrett. I'm going to assume that's a text-to-speech thing. Where are we going to have to put up with the 9 for a while, 0 retirements? Which is true. Which is why the only way we can fix this, and the most reasonable solution I've heard is that when we went to 9 justices, we got there because there were 9 court districts. So the idea would be to have one justice for every court district. And so if we went to even that out again, then we would have 13 justices. And that one, people was like, well, it's to keep some people from just adding on whoever they want. Well, I think we just passed legislation that ties the number of court districts to the number of court districts to the number of justices. So then, you don't have to worry about that. And if we add more court districts, we add more judges. And then we'd have a 7-6 Supreme Court, which would be much more along the lines of where we are politically. The idea that we're, 2/3, they represent 2/3 of the people is insane. I should have been reading the damn text. I'm stupid. I don't think the federal government needs to be involved in it, nor do I think the Supreme Court should be hearing cases on it already. And I agree. I think that the transgender issues are way outsized. I think that, when it comes to trans people in sports, it should just be left up to the schools and the leagues. The states don't need to get into it. The courts don't need to get into it. There are some sports where I think maybe there is some legitimate fairness issue there. But for the most part, it's such a small problem. There's so few people that are involved in it. And the number of lives it saves greatly outweighs any harm it's done. And a lot of the stuff, like sitting there talking about safety issues and stuff, is just a bunch of hateful nonsense. And I think the way this issue has been handled by Republican Party, or more honestly, Donald Trump and his lapdogs. Got to keep the population up. I get it. Whatever that means. They didn't write the 14th Amendment to keep the population up, Luke. You're a walking pun. Some people would agree with that. I don't know if that was I do the pun. Oh, you're talking about the popping? I like that one. It is the pun show. I feel like I need to get a good pun in here every now and then. Otherwise, I'm not being faithful to the name of the show. But that one was pretty good. I was pretty proud of that one. But I think this is an issue. There is an issue, and Serena Williams, the best female tennis player ever, proved to people that men have an advantage whether they want it or not. Well, what about Billie Jean King? I don't like. There was she beat one of the top-ranked tennis players. We should have completely crushed the Confederacy so they wouldn't have crawled back as the MAGA. She played the male ranked 204th in the world. So she is supposed to be miles better than him. And she lost 6-0-5-1. Yeah. Well, he also wasn't taking this is one of the disingenuous things, and I'm not talking about you here, Harry. They take hormone supplements and things like that hormone suppressors, and they have to be on them for 2 years. They have to have a certain amount of like testosterone levels reduced to a certain point, and before they can compete. So a lot of that innate unfairness is actually addressed. So if he took these hormone suppressants for 2 years so he could play this game, I don't know if you get the same result. If conservatives are so smart, why are all the large cities blue? But don't you know that more land votes for? No, I love it when they show you these maps, of counties that voted for, Trump, as though everybody in every one of those counties voted for Trump, or as if that sampling or that somehow land votes. Like, sorry, that's not how it works. A majority of Americans did not vote for Trump in either election. A majority of Americans voted for Clinton, and a plurality of the Americans voted for Trump, but less than half of them. Of course, asking MAGAs to understand the difference between a plurality and a majority probably is asking too much. Cities are blue because Democrats have the advantage in registration. Here in Philadelphia, Democrats outnumber Republicans 7-1. We've not had a Republican mayor since 1950. That's probably part of it. I think also Democratic policies are more favorable to people that live in cities. Like the other part of that is that the other thing I want to think of that makes me think of, this is also why the SAVE Act, which is being labeled again and again as a voter ID bill, is not a voter ID bill. It's a voter registration bill. And one of the things they want to do is they want to make it harder to register. And I don't just mean with the birth certificate showing your proof of citizenship. I mean the having to register in person. I live in Elgin, Texas. My DMV does not have as long of a wait as the one in Austin. And when you're talking about mandating that you have to go and update your registration in person, whether you've voted before or not, whether or not you're already registered or not, if you move, you have to go in person to register. And there are going to be some people who just don't want to go. There are going to be some people who don't know they need to go and do it in person. Some people won't even know they need to change their address at all. And so they're going to go to vote and they're going to find out, no, you're not allowed to vote. We took you off the polls or off the rolls. Liberals leave their hometowns for better education and opportunities. I think there's probably some of that, but I think it's also as people leave their homes and encounter the rest of the world and get educated, they find out that a lot of this stuff that their parents told them aren't true. And I'm not talking about political stuff. I'm talking about things like Noah's Ark wasn't a real story. Like, they really teach their kids that the earth is 6,000 years old. Are you circumcised? Why does that matter? There's also this issue of white flight. Republican voters moved to the burbs. Yeah, that was the whole redlining thing. The Democrat Party are destroying. Oh, so you're talking about in Philadelphia. Yeah, that's a big part of it. In Chicago, it was interesting because then they started moving back and then chased the people of color out to the suburbs. The Democrat Party, you see, there's no such thing as the Democrat Party. Like, when you start off a sentence like that, you've already lost any notion that you're going to say anything of value. If you're going to start criticizing the party and you don't even know what the name of the party is, I'm going to guess you don't know anything at all about the party. So when you say they're destroying the country, I think you're just repeating stupid ad hominem attacks, and you've never actually learned anything about politics. They are no longer a political party, but are a terrorist group against America. No, they're not. You know, there is one party that where the leader of the party instigated a terrorist attack on the United States, and it's not the Democratic Party. Donald Trump is responsible for the biggest terrorist attack in the United States by American citizens, without question. So don't sit there and go through all this nonsense. Go read a book if you know how to read. If not, if you don't know how to read, we can sit down. I will teach you how to read. Republican voters fled minority communities. The 1% party. The party that like sits there and thinks the Jeffrey Epstein class is the one that's like got their best interest at heart. I think the biggest tragedy in semi-recent American politics was the Democrats losing the 2000 election. I think they could have done some real good with the $200+ billion surplus. You just have to wonder. And, you know, like another thing is on the way out, this is one of the things the CIA director at the time was with Bill Clinton and George Bush. And Bill Clinton told Bush on the way out, he said the number one threat to America right now is Osama bin Laden. And Bush just completely ignored him. And you just have to wonder, would Al Gore have ignored him? And if Al Gore hadn't ignored him, there were I think it was described as there were things in the tree, and if you shook the branches, they would have fallen out. Like there was knowable things out there that were telling us 9/11 could happen. And if Al Gore shook those branches, maybe 9/11 doesn't happen. And then when you couple that, when you've got like things like Wolfowitz and what's his name, the Attorney General, I forget his name right now. There a lot of the key people in the Bush administration were signatories to this thing. It was called a white paper called Project for the New American Century. And in that paper, it said, if there is a major terrorist attack on the United States, we need to take advantage of that and blame it on Iraq so that we can go after Iraq. This came after we pulled out of Iraq instead of going for the oil. And you just have to wonder how different everything would have been. Maybe there wouldn't be a 9/11. Maybe if there was a 9/11, there wouldn't be this rush to war. Maybe we don't go to war with Iraq at all. Maybe we don't have this Homeland Security Act. Maybe ICE doesn't exist. Maybe ICE never gets created. Maybe we're not worried about a DNI right now because there is no such thing as the DNI. Like, you ever think about that? Like, this is what I mean when I say, what is the end game? And when I talk about not being for the lesser of two evils, because the greater of two evils has its consequences. And just, you know, like taking the moral high ground and being like, I refuse to go along with the lesser of two evils. Well, if you permit the greater of two evils, doesn't that make you complicit in the greater evil? You could do something to prevent it, and you don't. You know, like think of Schindler's List. He couldn't stop what was happening, but he did what he could to save as many lives as possible. Was he just going along with the lesser of two evils? Or did he save lives? Right now, there are like literally millions of people that are dead as a result of Donald Trump. There are hundreds of millions of lives that have been negatively impacted in our own country because of Donald Trump. Half of them are women who no longer have a right to their own body. All of this is consequences of Donald Trump being elected. And all of that is an extension of people that refuse to vote for the lesser of two evils. Well, Hillary Clinton was not going to appoint judges that were pro-life. Say what you want, but that is an objective fact. John Roberts, Al Gore wasn't going to appoint John Roberts or Scalia. You got to think about things. Think about the Supreme Court, and I mean that a lot right now, because there are some Senate seats that are up. And who the next Senate is going to determine who is sitting on the Supreme Court for another generation. Because Scalia and Thomas are getting old, and they're going to, if the Republicans hold the Senate, they're going to step down. And the Republicans will hold the Senate, the Supreme Court for another generation. And not just the Republicans. I'm talking about the pseudo-Republican fascists. They're going to hold the entire nation hostage for another generation because you couldn't vote for the lesser of two evils. Don't vote for the greater of two evils. Don't be complicit. Think of the end game. Play chess for once. That's the reason why the Pratt guy lost in Los Angeles. Republican voters don't live in the jurisdiction. Well, yeah. That wouldn't have been used for, I mean, that's not the only reason the Pratt guy lost. I mean, remember, the Pratt guy was nowhere near going to win enough votes. He just nearly finished second. And there was like a dozen Democrats on it, or liberals. So he wasn't going to win in a runoff and come even close to it. The whole thing was a hyperbolic overreaction by the entire media because it was like the guy that won the Marjorie Taylor Greene's district in the primary and then lost, in the first primary and then lost in the runoff. Like, we all knew he wasn't going to win. He actually did a lot better in the runoff than a lot of people would have expected. But nobody thought he was going to win. Republicans can't afford to live in cities. Well, some of them can. Most of them are in Donald Trump's administration. I always vote twice. You're not trying hard enough. In the case of American politics, it is lesser of two evils. But the Maggots party are so much worse than the other evil. So, I mean, it's just like, there are consequences. And the differences between the Republic, they're like, oh, both parties are the same. No, they're not. There's massive differences between the parties. And that doesn't mean that the Democrats are flawless. That doesn't mean I've got a Chuck Schumer fan club t-shirt. That doesn't mean that I think that everything that Hakeem Jeffries says is like should be in the Bible. No. But I'll take Hakeem Jeffries over Mike Johnson 8 days out of 7. I'm sorry, I was on the wrong post. No more mail-in ballots, one-day voting. Why? Why? Give me one good reason. Why? Because Donald Trump told you that? Do you have the courage to actually question Donald Trump? Why? Donald Trump votes by mail. So sad to say, my friend, but they don't care about you. I don't know who doesn't care about me, but I don't care if they care about me. I'm not voting for a politician because I think they care about me. I'm voting for a politician because their policies are better or worse for me. Whether they, subjectively care about me is kind of irrelevant. I mean, Donald Trump doesn't care about me. Donald Trump doesn't even care about his own children. Trump votes by mail. I'm sorry, I overreact. Oh, don't worry. I'm just sometimes I overreact. So I don't. You didn't bother me. Just so you know, Cindy, we're cool. It goes against their agendas. Looking to the Supreme Court. Sometimes it's hard to know what people mean because I'm always behind in the comments. So I'm always reacting to something like 5 minutes later. So sometimes I misconstrue what people mean. So apologies to you, Cindy. Looking at the Supreme Court uses amendments and articles of the Constitution aimed at a specific issue. See, this is another one of those ones where text-to-speech got a specific issue for other issues all the time. Yes, they're very selective on when they are going to be textualists. Court packing is wrong, left or right. It's not court packing if it's just one per district. What does court packing mean? And it's not, to me, it's not about left or right. Here's my view is the Supreme Court should reflect America, and it does not currently reflect America. So it is packed. So is if packing the Supreme Court is wrong, Walter, then a packed Supreme Court is wrong. So depacking the Supreme Court would be right by that. Like leaving a Supreme Court stacked is packing it. Like they did with the 14th Amendment when it comes to the abortion issue. Yes. They actually, with the abortion, they literally quoted a 16th century witch hunter and ignored, I think it's the 9th Amendment that says that we have rights reserved that aren't, when they wrote the Bill of Rights, they were like, we can't think of every conceivable right. So the rights that we don't specifically mention, they still belong to the people. And it's always been presumed that the 9th Amendment included that. And the thing about Roe versus Wade is it just fundamentally said it's not about whether a woman has a right to abortion or not, it's whether a woman has a right to privacy or not. So the federal government can't sit there and dig around in your medical records and decide whether or not you're committing crimes. That your medical decisions are a fundamental right to privacy. I would say the same thing about children and transgender rights. Your health care is a personal, individual right, even if it's not enumerated in the Constitution. That was up until Dobbs. That was the presumption. That's where we get, that's why interracial marriage was overturned. That's why gay marriage was overturned. Because these are privacy rights. And now we have according to Thomas, ironically, we no longer have a fundamental right to privacy. Welcome to the indigenous fight taught by your system. I'm not sure what that means. I don't know what you mean by welcome to the indigenous fight, and I don't know what you mean by taught by my system. I don't know what system is mine. Trump has moved on from his stupid reflecting pool. Did I tell you, Brett, this is my idea for the reflecting pool. I figured out what we should do about the reflecting pool. I want to paint the rainbow flag at the bottom of the reflecting pool. What do you think? You gave me the idea when you called the American flag a pride flag. So I was like, what if we really had a pride flag in the reflecting pool? And you go there and you just reflect on how everybody has rights. And wouldn't it just be poetic and beautiful that Abraham Lincoln who is, in a way, the father of all people having rights, and not just white people. Everything else cascade, like he didn't, champion women's rights, but everything else cascaded from Lincoln. All the other, like everyone should have rights. All that cascaded from Lincoln. So what an appropriate place to put it. Anyway, that's my idea. And I love that it would trigger every single MAGA. I think that would be beautiful. Peasant pilgrims. Yes. I don't know what you're talking about. But yeah, a lot of the pilgrims were peasants. A lot of the immigrants that came over here were peasants. This idea that we should only let rich people with bachelor's degrees and master's degrees immigrate, like Trump suggests, denies our entire history as a country. Yeah, it was a bunch of poverty people that settled America. And when I say settled America, I mean, in the positive, the genocide against Native Americans was bad. I'm not trying to just cavalierly jump over that, but I think that it's possible to hold multiple thoughts in a head at the same time. So we got some laughy faces, great mind things like. I don't know what. So T Tapu says, "Oh, really? I don't know what." Ignorance is abundant here. Feel free to correct me on anything, Mike. The same system that's flawed. What system is flawed? That doesn't really help. How long till the American cult does a Jim Jones move to Greenland? The Greenland thing. I wonder how long it's going to take to get back to the Greenland thing throughout history. I don't know what you're talking about. Walter, oh my God, I wish. I'm for all that as long as we do it. It's a 6 Democrat or 6 Republican, 1 independent split on the court, because otherwise you'd get accused of stacking the court very quickly. I don't really care if somebody accuses us of stacking the court. I don't. It's stacked. Unstacking it is the important thing. Like you got, I don't think six Republicans, 6 Democrats. I don't think that's going to work. But if there were a way to make it work, I'd be fine. Like, what is an independent anyway? I think sometimes we get this idea that an independent means somewhere in between a Democrat and a Republican, like the halfway point. Like there's this notion that being in the middle somehow makes you more right. What about slavery? Is like some people would say slavery was bad. Some people would say slavery was good. If you go back to 1860, like the middle would be indentured servitude, maybe. I'm okay with slavery, but you should get a chance to buy yourself out. Like if you work 21 years, then you get freedom. Is that the middle ground on slavery? Does that become okay if you can eventually purchase yourself? Like, you see what I'm saying? And I'm using this as an extreme example to make a point. I'm using it rhetorically. I'm not actually suggesting anything or suggesting that anybody is. I'm trying to use an example that I think everybody would agree with, that slavery is bad. So the middle ground on a topic isn't always necessarily the best. I guess they've started on that tunnel from Russia to Alaska. I just found out about it today that it was starting. Is it being built by illegal immigrants? I haven't heard that one. Is this the new conspiracy? 13 people trying to decide every case. Well, they don't really decide every case. They only decide the cases they choose to listen to. A lot more cases than that are, they only hear like a tiny percentage of cases. Why not? And I'm hoping that's about my idea for the rainbow flag in the reflecting pool. Bobby Riggs was an old man when he played King. I have no idea who Bobby Riggs is or why he was playing King. I was under the impression that the majority was silent and never voted, but I guess this time they are. Yeah, the whole silent majority thing is hilarious because they're not the majority and they sure as hell aren't silent. You can't shut MAGAs up, and you can't shut Trump up. You just walk into a store. I took my dog to the vet, and I'm just sitting there in my vet, and this guy sits down next to me and starts talking about how great Donald Trump is. So I let him talk for a bit, and then I laid into him. And then he's like, I was talking to a white guy that's middle-aged. I assumed that you would agree with me, with kind of look on his face. And he was sitting there. Everybody was like, everybody in the vets, because he was talking on, so I talked loud back. And I just like sat there and hammered at him. And he was like trying to, like get away. And they came and they called his name and he went with his dog. And I was like, as he was walking away, I was like still correcting him on his nonsense. He was sitting there talking about how Hillary Clinton lies, as though Donald Trump doesn't lie. So I started recounting to him all the things Donald Trump lied about. And then like he left, they shut the door, and everybody else in the waiting room clapped. But yeah, the silent majority, my ass. Any majority that wants to make it hard to vote, any party that wants to make it hard to vote says it all. Right. And there are a lot of Republicans that would be disenfranchised by the Save America Act. I've been thinking maybe the Save American Act is actually an acronym, and it's like the Save a mendacious, egotistical, racist, idiotic, criminal asshole. Kind of works for me. Any party that wants to make it hard to vote says it all. Their policies do not fly with majority opinion of U.S. citizens. Politicians want minority rule. And it's funny that they quote the polls on voter ID. Like, first of all, the Save America Act, again, is not a voter ID law. It is a voter registration law. And the whole point is to make it much, much harder to register to vote, whether you're a citizen or not. It has very little, if almost nothing, to do with non-citizens. And you know that because if it were law in place in the last 30 years, it would not have prevented a single undocumented immigrant from voting, because all the ones that we know voted used fake documents to do it. So yeah. You mean Josh did not live inside of a... No, Jonah did not live inside a whale, believe it or not. Or a fish, for that matter. Because it actually, I think it says fish. It doesn't say whale. Democrat or a terrorist group. Or a terrorist... Is someone listening to Too Much Talk Radio? It's like, they think that a Democrat shot Charlie Kirk. They think that Democrats tried to assassinate Donald Trump. They just... repeat, they think the Democrats shot the Democrats in Minnesota. These people do not read. They just listen to right-wing radio and think that everything that Ben Shapiro says is right. And probably listening to too much Fox and Newsmax. Nothing worse than going into a pizza place and the owner has Newsmax cranked on the volume. Instant turnaround. They usually go broke in a year. Oh, I don't, and I if I ran a business, I wouldn't put any politics on. That's just dumb business practice. Politics and pizza don't mix. Even if you have, anyway, I was about to go on a big tirade about pineapple on pizza, because personally, I think anybody should be able to eat their pizza however they want. People get all upset because people have pineapple on their pizza. It's like, just eat your own damn pizza. If you're not eating it, don't worry about it. Anyway, and I hate George W. Bush for one reason and one reason only. He single-handedly ruined the reputation of my favorite prime minister. I remember when George W. Bush was one of the worst presidents we'd ever had and the dumbest. I always like to say, before Bush, I never thought I would be smarter than the president. Before Trump, I never thought Bush would be smarter than the president. That was a little before my time. Who was the prime minister? Oh man, they've been through like 40 prime. They go through a prime minister like once a week now in UK. Sorry, Harry. It takes two folks to make a fight. Saddam was a bad guy, but it didn't take two folks to make us fight. Saddam didn't do anything to provoke the fight. Saddam had absolutely nothing to do with 9/11. And it's not that, like Saddam had nothing at all to do with 9/11. Saddam Hussein was not a threat to the United States. Saddam Hussein did not have any nuclear weapons. He did not have any chemical weapons. He was a bad person, but there are lots of bad people running countries. And we're not just using that as a pretext to go to war. Paul Wolfowitz said it himself. Somebody asked him, what is the difference between Iraq and all these other countries? And he said, and this is an exact quote, they're not sitting on on the world's second largest lake of oil. That's why we invaded Iraq. Keep pointing out the truth. Thank you, Curtis. Oscar Schindler actually considered committing suicide later in life because he thought he could have saved more people, and he didn't. Man, that movie, when I saw that movie, I saw it in a theater. And it was the most powerful movie watching experience in a theater I've ever had. It was, I'll never forget it. It was at Mall of America, and the theater was packed. And it's the only time I've ever been to a movie where not a single person stood up to leave until the end credits were all done rolling. And then we all stood up and filed out without one person saying a single word, like not even to the person behind them in line. It was absolutely quiet all the way out to the parking lot. It was so emotionally powerful. Brett says, I don't know what the was. Hello, everybody in heaven, on earth, guy. Yeah. God bless us all in the day. What is the point of that? I don't get people coming in here doing this Jesus is Lord stuff. Like, do you just like do that? You just go from one thing to the next. You think it ever has any impact? I have lost how many prime ministers have been since Tony Blair. It's like the Prime Minister of the Month Club. Sorry, Harry. Gordon Brown, David, Teresa, Boris, Liz, Rishi, Kara, and now Andy. It's like there is a lot of prime ministers. And we can't get rid of a big, stupid, orange, pumpkin-headed, narcissistic, racist, xenophobic, misogynistic, rapist, criminal, felon. There was rumors about Alito not retiring. I don't think he's going to retire now, but I think if the Republican Senate holds, he will resign before Trump leaves office. He and Thomas will give Trump the chance to appoint 2 more senators or 2 more Supreme Court justices. Justice Alito is 76. Justice Thomas just turned 78. It's amazing to me how he's so full of poop. I say he is, I've mentioned this before, I find Donald Trump, I say he is a poop paradox because it never stops coming out of his mouth. Poop never stops coming out of his butt. And yet Trump is never any less full of poop, even though he is endless fountain of poop out of both ends. Justice Sotomayor, just 72. Yeah. Even Sotomayor is not young anymore. And, but she's not going to resign and give Trump another chance. But, maybe she should resign if the Democrats win the White House back. Because then she'll be 74 after this. So By the time the next, if the Democrats won the House back, by the time he left office, even if it was one term, she would be 78. So I think that's a crackling idea. Denton Kavanaugh, I think he's pointing that's my reflecting pool idea. I love my reflecting pool idea. Didn't Kavanaugh and Thomas have some very controversial women issues back in the day? Yeah, yeah. Both of them kind of like, tried to rape people. Well, Anita Hill, I don't know if Thomas actually tried to rape her, but he definitely sexually harassed her. Of course, that was overlooked. Forget integrity. But Kavanaugh definitely, I mean, I watched that testimony and I 100% believe what that woman said. I was living in Italy. I was in the Air Force, so I missed the hearing with Anita Hill, and I've watched it since, and I believe her. But the woman that said that Kavanaugh raped her or tried to rape her with his friend, I 100% believe that. And you know what's interesting? The friend never came out and said anything. He didn't affirm it, but he didn't deny it. But they have it stacked 6-3 majority for the Republicans in the normal way, but it wasn't through the normal way. They did it in a very they went like the first one passed away, or the first, like what's his name, the one with the Gorsh, was appointed by Trump, but because they wouldn't appoint Merrick Garland, Obama should have had that first appointment. And then Roberts, they said, oh, well, let the voters decide. And then they changed the rules again with Barrett. And they rammed her through like 2 weeks before the election. So both of those were not the normal way that they're done. If we were done the way it's normally done, then Obama would have had another one, and Biden would have had another one. So it would be a 5-4 Supreme Court right now, Democrats, if it were done the normal way. And that's why I say they stacked it. They changed the rules to rig the court. I don't know what else you call that. If we just decide to add 4 judges, I think we could cause a lot of problems, not just within the Democratic Party, but for the whole argument. So we are not the same people as but this is like the gerrymandering thing, right? If the Republicans are already doing it and you just let them do it, and then now we're just the same as them. Okay, but if you're in a boxing match and the other guy is punching you in the balls and you don't punch them in the balls back, you're gonna lose. It's not the same thing if you punch them in the balls back. They're the ones that started cheating. The Republican Party is the one that wouldn't, even give a vote on Merrick Garland. So it's not the same thing. And if we just come out and trust because we have decided that from this point forward it should be equal to the number of districts, it would cause an uproar. Uproar away. I don't care. I don't care if it makes Republicans mad. I care that right now women don't have the right to decide their own health care. Like, good. Let them get mad. I don't care. The tunnel is real. They're really building a tunnel from Russia to Alaska. I'll have to look into that. What I meant was a lot of people think on the side of a Democratic Party, but they're just they're libertarians and don't vote. Those are the majority, in my opinion, but they're pissed off now. And I think that there is also a lot of people that are independents. Like right now, basically anybody that goes to a grocery store is not happy with Trump. Great story about the Trump at the vet office. Applause. It was. I wish somebody had a camera, and I wish I could have gone viral on that one, because I was ripping that guy apart. Jesus was a mushroom. Can you please confirm? I don't know. I know Donald Trump's penis looks like one. The older generation can't do all the standing up. Iraq is a complicated issue, not as much in America, because I think they were blatantly trying to lie and invade. They did. They went and they said there can be. This is a direct quote from George W. Bush. There can be no doubt that that Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction, and especially that part about there can be no doubt, because there was doubt. There was a lot of doubt. There was enough doubt that the UN didn't believe them when Colin Powell went and testified to them. There was doubt. There was doubt because the inspection team that the UN sent came back and said there's no evidence of it. They said there can be no doubt. But there was doubt because the centrifuges that they said the Saddam Hussein had weren't even able to produce weapons of mass destruction. They weren't able to refine the uranium enough to produce weapons of mass destruction. And there weren't. And everybody, like you get people that act like, oh, well, we went in there and it turns out we were wrong. But we didn't learn anything new. We already knew that. It was an outright lie from the very beginning. We knew they didn't. And that's why I think it's really important. You go back and you look at the PNAC agreement, Project for the New American Century. If you've never heard about it, look it up. It says in there, it specifically says, if something happens, let's go after Iraq. Everybody else saw a terrorist attack. Everybody else saw the 9/11 towers came down and they saw a tragedy. They saw this horrible, horrible thing. And the Bush administration saw an opportunity and they took advantage of it. And they lied to the American people and they brought us into a war. And now the Republican Party somehow wants to make it like the Democrats did it. Donald Trump, champion of no new wars, is doing it all over again with Iran. The guy that says he was against Iraq, even though he said he was, that he was for it before. He's on tape talking to Howard Stern about it. Don't give me that. I was always against the Iran or the Iraq war. Now he's doing it. Now he's the one making the orders in Iran. And he's making the world a less safe place. He's making Iran a stronger country. And he's started a new war. The issue of Iraq in this country is really, really complicated. We have had an independent inquiry after independent inquiry after independent inquiry into the issue. And every time they have said that the government in my country acted in good faith, and they say that in the legal authority to invade Iraq was blurry after then outright legal or illegal. The issue of Iraq having anything to do with 9/11 was not a thing pushed in this country. And the intelligence service has made it very clear that Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. But everyone, and I repeat, everyone agreed that Saddam Hussein had weapons. No. But that's where you're wrong, Harry. I know for a fact that not everybody thought that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, because I even had a website devoted to that. Like I was studying this on a daily basis and looking at things. Like I wasn't just learning this from history. In the moment, I knew that it was ridiculous to say that, what's his name? Little, I think. Tom Little said that the guy that was in charge of the UN's weapons of mass destruction inquiry said he didn't have weapons of mass destruction. He didn't. He had them at one point. He had chemical weapons, but those chemical weapons were way past their expiration date, and he had used them against his own people. That's true. But that he no longer had them, and there was no design to use them against us. So yeah, he had them and used them against his own people a decade earlier. Like he didn't have them, had them at one time, but doesn't mean have them now. Yeah, the only question was whether he still had them, which we knew he didn't, and we knew that the ones he had were expired. They like the inspection team actually had inspected the ones he had and confirmed that. I still can't wrap my mind around the fact that you can be president and be a felon, but an average Joe six pack at McDonald's, if he's a felon. And you know what? In some states, if you're a felon, you can't vote. But in every state, you can vote for a felon to be president. Enjoy reading my speech, Kelly. Hope it was fun. P.S. I'm sorry. That's all right. You're allowed to disagree with me, even if you're wrong. I can't work at McDonald's if if he's a felon, and that's like a low job. MAGA can't read. Yeah, Thomas and Alito take vacations and gifts from rich Republican donors, and this was like I spent a few days in the news cycle. These people that sit there and decide that it's okay for, a handful of Americans to own both parties that were paid, that were bought by the people that own the parties. At least one of them. Gee, maybe Thomas should have recused himself from anything to do with funding elections, considering they're also funding him. The other justices take gifts as well, but not on the same scale, and they report it. That's the other thing. I mean, like there's a false equivalence going on there. Like somebody gets a free book, that's not the same thing as somebody getting a trip to the Bahamas and not reporting it. I can look into it, but look at what the gifts are, and there's a difference. And look at whether they're reporting them. And look at whether or not they're recusing themselves from cases involving the people that gave them those gifts. There's a lot of differences. This is like one of those things where I say, one time I went to HEB and I accidentally forgot to pay for a carton of milk. Got home, realized I hadn't paid for it, and I just kept the milk. Didn't go back to HEB just to pay for a carton of milk. I figured HEB can survive it. In case you don't know, HEB is like the largest grocery store in Texas. It's worth billions of dollars. They're not going to miss $1.20 carton of milk or whatever it was at the time. That doesn't mean I can't say bank robbery is bad. Well, it's all stealing. Well, and I mean, if you want to sit there and cross your eyes and look at it sideways, yeah, it's still stealing. But it's not the same. Have them enrolled the most rich, decadent, artery-clogging cheesecake of the week club. Man, you figure, am I the only one that's ever like, go ketchup, go ketchup? Like, it's sooner or later that McDonald's has got to do its work, right? Donald Trump's blood type is ketchup, I think. The UN was never going to sign off on Iraq because the French didn't want to. The French didn't want to do it because Saddam Hussein didn't have weapons of mass destruction, and they knew it. The Germans didn't want to do it because they knew that he didn't have weapons of mass destruction. The Chinese thought it was a mistake because he didn't have weapons of mass destruction. The Russians thought it was a mistake. Now, I don't know what the Russians were thinking, but like the other countries literally were saying, no, he does not have weapons of mass destruction. So your premise is the premise, your premise, I'm saying they were saying this to the US. I'm not saying your premise is wrong. I'm saying they were saying that the US premise was wrong. They just did not believe he had weapons of mass destruction. And spoiler alert, he didn't have weapons of mass destruction. The weapons inspectors gave vague reports. No, but they weren't vague. I looked at them. I read them. I knew for a fact at the time. I'm not saying this retroactively. I went online and I had it was called crushbush.blogspot.com or whatever. It was on a Blogspot. I had a blog. It was my first blog. And I would go through and I would look at it every single day. I knew for a fact, Harry, at the moment, that there was no weapons of mass destruction. I looked at the evidence for weapons of mass destruction and looked at the response to that evidence. So, I mean, for me, it's not just theoretical or could it have been known or did they know? No, everything that was in the public domain pointed out that Donald Trump did not, or that Saddam Hussein did not have weapons of mass destruction. So, all right. Anyway, let's move on past the Iraq discussion. The Iraqis did possess and use chemical weapons. Yes, but again, we knew it, like they had done it before. That doesn't mean they had them now. Official activation of the joint engineering and design phase began on the tunnel, not actual tunneling yet. What is the point of this tunnel? This is interesting. Must be killing Trump because it's called the Putin-Trump tunnel, not the Trump-Putin tunnel. But there was no evidence we had. I mean, and we're not talking like in 1990, in 2001, 1998 wasn't that long ago. Kelly, you rebel milk thief. I let go on escalators. I'm an animal. Did you ever hear? Stephen Wright is one of my favorite comics. Well, at least it was. I don't know if he's alive anymore or what. But my favorite line was where he met his girlfriend that had long flowing plaid hair when he was playing with a slinky on the escalator. And ever since then, I've wanted to take a slinky to an escalator. All right. Congressman Tom Keene Jr. finally goes back to work, claims he was diagnosed with depression. How many months do you need to recover from depression? All right. As somebody that's actually had dealings with depression, I'm not going to go after anybody for dealing with depression. It's a very real thing. And it's not being sad. I think sometimes people that haven't dealt with it don't know. I had a friend that was sitting there telling me depression wasn't real and asked somebody that had experienced depression. I told her, you don't really know what you're talking about. And she's like, well, Stephen Hawking is a quadriplegic and he doesn't, have depression. And I'm like, asking Stephen Hawking to not be depressed isn't like, asking, I'm sorry. I told her, asking somebody that's depressed to not be depressed isn't like asking Stephen Hawking to not be depressed. Asking somebody that is depressed to not be depressed is like asking Stephen Hawking to walk. The ailment is real. It's a real thing. And I have really experienced. I've had real experience with it. And, I was on medication for like 2 months and that helped and I got off it. But it's difficult. It's a difficult thing to deal with. And it's, some people think it's a brain chemistry issue. It's not just, I've got the SADS. So, yeah. Now, see, like, this is more of an issue. He hasn't show up to his job since March with no explanation until now. Fetterman went through the same thing. And he explained what was happening when he went out. And I like the lack of explanation I have an issue with. Like he should have said, I'm having troubles with depression. I need to step aside. But let's like move the discussion forward, because this whole thing with the birthright citizenship has raised a new issue to me that I think is, and I would love to hear all your thoughts on this, because I think we have a pretty good panorama of people that are regulars on this show. And so Donald Trump is saying that he's going to ask Congress to amend the Constitution now, which admits he admits that now he's admitting you need to amend the Constitution if you're going to change the Constitution, which, is good. But I thought this would be a fun thing to talk about on the show today. If you could amend the Constitution, if you could have one amendment to the Constitution, what would it be? I said, look, there's only been the Constitution has only been amended one time since 1971. That was a 1993 amendment, the 27th, which basically just says any law that affects Congress can't go into effect until the next Congress. So if Congress gives itself a pay raise, that pay raise can't kick off until the next Congress starts. And that was what prompted it. Of all the amendments, that one is pretty small. Because it's not like you're living paycheck to paycheck if you're a member of Congress anyway. But for in terms of anything real affecting most people, the Constitution, affecting everyday Americans, the Constitution hasn't been amended since 1971. And there were the first 10 amendments, which were out of the gate. Then it was amended 26 times over the next 200 years. And now it's only been like one time in 50 years. So, or 16 times over the next 50 years. So if you could amend the Constitution, what would it be? And don't say something like overturn Citizens United, because you can't have an amendment. This overturns Citizens United. Like, how would you overturn Citizens United? What would the actual amendment say? Like, you must be an actual person to have rights. How would you overturn the Citizens United? Just imagine having a job, Congress, and not accomplish anything. That would be depressing. Yeah, it's kind of hard to look back at your law. They did get Donald Trump's tax cuts through. This is actually the last 4 years of Congress under Mike Johnson have been the least productive years in history of any Congress. Clinical depression is real. It is. And I'm not going to, go after somebody for being depressed. I think that Walter has a valid point that if you're out for depression for an indeterminate time and you don't know how long you're going to be out, you have a responsibility to at least let your own party know, hey, I'm depressed. I don't know when I'm going to be back. I need to check into this clinic to take care of my own self, my mental health. Why is MAGA full of the dumbest people ever? Well, I think that question answers itself, doesn't it? Are they MAGAs because they're dumb, or are they dumb because they're MAGAs? As Donald Trump would say, I love stupid people. Or I love the uneducated. Because they're orange. God gives them the green light to be the worst. There. Oh, because they're orange God. I see. Because they're orange God gives them permission to be the worst. He says what we're all thinking. It's funny, have you ever noticed they'll say, he just says what we're all thinking. And then when you point out what he actually said, well, what he really meant was this. So he didn't say what you were thinking, or, they just, what he actually says seems to have no relevance. Here is my amendment. The British guy is the first one to come up with an answer to this question. Here is my amendment. We declare the Constitution null and void and order a special election of a 500-man constitutional convention to write new Constitution. This is my amendment. There are some people that there's one concern about that, which is how do you set the rules for that convention? So you have 500 people. Does every state send 10 people and each state gets equal? Is Wyoming equally as valid as California? Because there's some people, like if you had a constitutional convention, all the states would have equal rights. would be treated equally. And right now, there's just more red states than blue states. And so some people have floated the idea of a constitutional convention where we rewrite the Constitution, and then the red states, because there's more red states than blue states, can just basically, say fetuses are individual rights and so on. I think if you're going to be off long terms as representative, you should resign. Is 2 months long enough to resign? If we could only be led by an unadulterated form of AI with compassion, not the tweaked Elon, get to be led by AI, that would be funny. My brother-in-law is a pilot. He's a good guy. He's a pilot. I have one that's a pilot and one that's a MAGA, so not to confuse them. But he worked for Spirit Airlines, the one that recently went bankrupt. And so I was talking to him today, and he's got a new job with American. So I'm happy for him. And so I was saying, I think this is one of those jobs where we're safe from AI, where you're safe from AI. I don't think anybody's going to get on a plane being flown by an AI pilot. Would you want to be on a plane flown by an AI pilot? If we're going to rewrite, but actually, that's what I wonder. Wonder if we should have planes that are flown by drone pilots, because then you don't have to worry about like hijacking them. You can't threaten a pilot that's not in the same. Of course, then maybe you hijack the room they're flying it from. Anyway, so maybe that's a stupid idea. If we're going to rewrite the Constitution, time to curb the war powers. Okay, but let's not talk about rewriting the Constitution. That's why I said you get one amendment. So we're not like doing all that kind of stuff. So if you were to, the ironic thing is the Constitution did curb the war powers. It's just been ignored what's actually in it. I think that the Constitution is actually really clear, and the early American history was really clear. Congress decides when we go to war, and the president decides. Congress decides when we use our military, and the president decides how we use our military. That's what the difference between the First and Second Amendment, or Article 1 and Article 2 is. People want to act like Article 2 means the president can do whatever he wants with the military. That's not what it says at all. Why is Article 1 there that says that the Congress has the power to declare war? Do you think that they were sitting there, well, what about police action? Like, they weren't thinking about police action. There was no, if as far as they were concerned, declaring war meant use the military in any way other than imminent self-defense. And that's clear from the Barnaby Wars. When Jefferson, the Barnaby states attacked American merchant ships, and they were defended. And then some people were like, we need to go after those and attack those states. And then Jefferson's like, no, we can't do that until Congress gives me permission. And then Congress gave him permission, and then he did it. So it's clear from that. We do not have a country where the president can just decide to declare war. There's no confusion on the War Powers Act, constitutionally speaking. It's historically speaking, it's become a muddled mess because Congress has let the president abuse his power. Every conflict since World War II has been an illegal war. And I mean that from both presidents. People are like, what about Obama? Yeah, well, the stuff Obama did was illegal too. Trump should be the governor of California, Stan. Donald Trump should learn how to go to the bathroom when he has to poop. Money is not speech would be my constitutional amendment. I like the spirit. I think it might need to be more, vetted than that, but I like the general. It is a social media channel, so I think that is a really articulate and precise way to put it, and it's a way to overturn Citizens United. And I always think of it as this: is freedom of speech does not mean freedom of shouting everybody else down. Just having the freedom of speech doesn't mean that your right exceeds everybody else's right. And when you make speech equivalent to money, then you are saying that the more money you have, the more rights you have. And that is an issue. I don't think that Donald Trump has more freedom of speech than I do just because he's a billionaire. Or Elon Musk has more freedom of speech than anybody else because he's a trillionaire. And if he wants to, if somebody wants to spend money saying something, if Elon Musk wants to buy Twitter and say stuff, he's free to. I'm not talking about that. But when Elon Musk is allowed to give people millions of dollars to register to vote, then I have a problem. There's a difference. Anyone who wants to rewrite the Constitution is trying to take the Second Amendment out of it. That's why they want to do that, especially. Okay, nobody here. What a weird question. What a weird statement. I think that I think that you probably don't understand what they wrote the Second Amendment. This is actually a good example of the whole textual, literal things that they talk about. The Second Amendment is really clear that in order, or the security of a how does it start? Anyway, something about the security of a free state being necessary. The right to bear arms shall not be infringed. I can't remember exactly how it starts, but it starts by talking about the militia. A militia being necessary for the security of a free state. A well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state. The right to bear arms shall not be infringed. Right? So it gives you a predicate for why we have the right to bear arms, and that is the security of a free state or a well-regulated militia. So it's clearly in the text about the militia. It's not about an individual right to bear arms. But the Supreme Court, in its infinite wisdom in Heller, decided that it doesn't really say that it didn't really mean that. And you can agree with that or disagree with that, but the fact is it says that. So if you're going to sit there and call yourself a literalist and a textualist, at least pay attention to the text. Alito seems to be really picky choosy when he decides that the actual words of the Constitution matter. The earth belongs, Thomas Jefferson, the earth belongs to the living generation. Every constitution then and every law naturally expires at the end of 19 years. Interesting. We need an amendment that bans political donations for everybody. Like nobody can make political donations. If some want to run, start a petition to get signatures supporting. Okay, how do they do that? Do they personally have to go door to door? Can they pay people? I think that becomes a non-starter. Whoever gets the most support gets public funding to run and free airtime for advertising that's tax deductible. I think that's maybe a little too restrictive, but it's a good thought. I think it's a good way to start thinking about things like outside the box. It just like knowing people that have tried to start grassroots campaigns. What you're talking about is actually would end up just reinforcing people that have money Because you know who's not going to have to worry about money if they're starting a campaign? Donald Trump. Donald Trump can just fund himself for a while. You know who can't? Somebody that works for a living. And so you're basically, if you make it that way to where you have to self-fund to start, then you have to be rich to start. You have to be able to not work a full-time job to pay the bills. Oh, here is my actual amendment to the U.S. Constitution, Section 1. The president shall no longer be considered responsible for nominating the Supreme Court justice. Instead of a committee of the 5 most senior House members and nominate Supreme Court justices. It's an idea. How would the problem then becomes the balance of powers? Like the executive branch has no say in the whole thing. And so that kind of goes against the whole constitutional premise of balance of powers and checks and balances. How are you supposed to run an election without donations? All House members shall now be elected for a 4-year term and all senators elected for an 8-year term. Problem with that is then you become, everything becomes too slow, right? The reason that we have representatives with a 2-year term is they have to be responsive. Like if you're going to have to go out and campaign next year, like right now, nobody in the House sits there and wants to rave about how great the Iran war is, because if they do, they have to go back and defend that position to their constituents. If they didn't have to worry about it for 3 more years, they wouldn't say anything. That's why if you pay attention, the Senate and the House tend to react to things a little bit differently. Because the Senate, and you look at senators, the ones that have to have campaigns, like some of them don't have to worry for 4 more years. Some of them have to worry some of them basically don't have to worry for 5 more years. Some of them have to worry for if they're going to have their job in 4 more months. If the whole of the House and half of the Senate elected every 4 years. Understand the president needed flexibility during the Cold War. But calling everything an emergency or a threat has gone too far. And Donald Trump has taken it to another level. Like he declared the Lincoln reflecting pool a national emergency. And that's why he was able to bypass the requirements that you get a bid. The Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool was an emergency. No, it wasn't. What, you think somebody's going to die of looking at the reflecting pool or something? Section 3, all rights under this Constitution only apply to actual persons and does not extend to corporations, foundations, trusts, or entities. See, that one's a good one. I like that one. Actual persons. There is my amendment. Personally, my amendment would be to get rid of the Electoral College. The Electoral College is an antiquated system that was put in the Constitution solely to protect the rights of slave owners. There's no need for it. I would get rid of the Electoral College and just declare that whoever wins the popular vote becomes president of the United States. Take all of this state stuff out of it. This whole idea that, oh, well, this way he has to go to certain states and, nobody's going to go campaign in North Dakota. Actually, nobody goes to campaign in Texas because Texas is a foregone conclusion. Nobody goes to a campaign in California because California is a foregone conclusion. You want to make the president campaign everywhere? Get rid of the Electoral College. That's the only way to do it. It is such an upside down. I learned in high school and grade school and in college that you need to have the Electoral College because the Electoral College guarantees that he has to campaign everywhere. Otherwise, they're just going to make North Dakota the garbage can of the country and everybody can go dump their nuclear waste there or something like that. Bull boost. You want to make sure that the president has to campaign everywhere? Make the guy in North Dakota's vote count just as much as the guy in California's, and the guy in West Virginia's, and the guy in Florida's, and the girl in Massachusetts, and the trans person in Nevada. Make every vote the same. And then every place is the same. He's got to run ads in North Dakota just as much as he's got to run an ad in Alabama and run an ad in Delaware. I just, plain and simple, clean cut. You want to solve the problem about having to wait until 5 o'clock or, 12 days to see who won what state or whatever? Fine. Whoever wins the popular vote wins the election. You don't even have to worry about, reporting results before polls close. Because everybody in California, that's like a fifth of the country. West Coast is like a third of the country. So whoever is ahead ain't going to change whether or not those votes get cast. I think that is the easiest way to do it. Just popular vote wins the election. Boom. That would be mine. With this amendment, the Electoral College is abolished, and whoever wins the popular vote becomes president. That's it. Or do you have a single issue amendments? The whole idea of me asking about amendments is you can change one thing about the Constitution, not like let's rewrite the Constitution. You already have the Senate confirmation process. But the 2-year is bollocks. They're just constantly running for re-election. They don't actually vote on policy. They vote on what... I of all the things that could be corrected, I think that one's kind of minor. I don't think that the reason I don't think they're actually always running. I think they're always running from the Republicans run from their voters. You see some of these town halls they're having, throwing people out for asking questions they don't want to answer. That's big Pandora's box, getting rid of the Electoral College. Name one reason we shouldn't get rid of the Electoral College. Name one. Just one. I've never heard a good reason for the Electoral College. I think the Electoral College is just terrible. It doesn't accomplish anything. But getting rid of the Electoral College won't really change how the country operates or makes anyone's... Well, if we got rid of the Electoral College, if we won by popular vote, George W. Bush never would have been president, and Hillary Clinton would have won over Donald Trump. And those things would definitely have an impact. Right now, we'd have a Supreme Court that, like, almost all the major problems we have right now would not exist without the Electoral College. How is it a Pandora's box? I'm curious. What are we worried about getting out? The Electoral College, from my understanding, was to protect the states. That's the scholarly view, but it was to protect the states, not the states. All right, the states in particular. When you look at American history and states' rights, it was the problem was slave states were worried that the free states were going to make slavery illegal. And so states' rights meant slave owners' rights. It's just that was the nice way to put it. Slavery was the frontline issue behind everything. These people that want to rewrite history and make it sound like slavery was just some tangential history issue to the Civil War or whatever, it was about states' rights. The states' rights to do what? Own other people. That's what it wasn't about the states' rights to decide how to run their own elections, which, by the way, right now seems to be an issue. No, it was the states' rights to own other people. So, I mean, ostensibly they say it was about states' rights. Like, that is, if you're talking about the literal text of the arguments, they wouldn't say say that, but that is effectively what they were arguing for. Not the electoral college being minor, but the length of the term of senators and representatives. Now, I think that, to me, that's a fairly minor thing. Like, I don't know how much is going to change. Like, I don't know how much is gained by that. You know, you'd basically have the House in sync with the president, which would do away with midterms. Now, I don't think I can get on board with that. Most of the succession documents, they actually included phrases like northern states' hostility to the institution of slavery in the new territories is a reason for succession. And most of those came in the first couple of sentences. They weren't like buried down at the end of it. Like, I think all but one or two of the states mentioned slavery in the first paragraph. So, and then a lot of the other things that they would talk about were tangential to slavery, like property rights. What property? Yeah, other people. I can't remember what the term they would use, but they're referring to Dred Scott. You know, they're referring to if a slave escapes and goes to North and then they don't return their property, like it was a horse. And then they make that sound like, you know, if they don't say, well, you know, this human being escaped and then, you know, acts like they're a person or something. So there's a, it's just like now. People don't want to say what they really mean because they know if they say what they really mean, they're going to sound like buttholes. And so they have to couch it in other terms that are more polite. I'll give Stephen Miller credit for this. At least he's doesn't try to hide his racism. From the Union, although he has a cuck. Whatever you do, if you remember anything from this show, remember that Stephen Miller was made into a cuck by a South American or by an African immigrant. All right. I just feel it's important that everybody knows an African immigrant made Stephen Miller into a cuck. And I'm not exaggerating. Ask Stephanie Miller about that one. I think it's hilarious. All right. So from the Union, so much for states' rights. Yeah. The SAVE Act is a big violation of states' rights. I think it's funny how the people that have crowed about states' rights, it was all about states' rights when it was like, why can't we gerrymander? Why can't we tell black people that they have to pass a citizenship test to vote? See, that's, you know, like when you get to the Jim Crow's laws and segregation and stuff like that, they would talk about states' rights. Now, when states' rights means something about protecting the rights of citizens instead of stripping the rights of citizens, now all of a sudden states' rights don't matter. I have never heard a conservative address the real issues people have with the SAVE Act, including Mike Johnson, that smug little smirky bleep, 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 bleepity, bleep, 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 bleep. I can't actually tell you what I think of Mike Johnson because I'm a monetized channel. But Mike Johnson will never address the real issues that many people, independents, Democrats, and Republicans have with the SAVE Act. Did you know this? Like the SAVE Act, I'm not being hyperbolic. I'll give you an example. Texas. When we're not talking about the most liberal state in the country here, the state of Texas gave their voting rolls to this system, and they identified like 1,378, I think is the number, something like that. It wasn't like a tiny number of people of voters that were problematic. Now, when I say problematic, I don't mean they were found that many non-citizens, which is the way that dishonest people use that number. All right. They included things like people that were naturalized but just hadn't been put in the system yet. When you're talking about the state of Texas and they're updated every 3 months, that's like 400 people a month. So there's always going to be a relatively large number of people that fit that category, right? And there were some other issues like typos and stuff like that. But 5% were just complete scripts. 5% were just like American citizens, born here, raised here, never did anything wrong. 100% never did, like, weren't even immigrants that were identified as non-citizens voting. So there is going to be a not insignificant, if 5% of the people being flagged by that system are actual American citizens and then they're being removed from the polls, you're going to have a lot of people that are American citizens that are just going to be denied the right to vote, all on the pretext that non-citizens are voting when non-citizens aren't voting. So I said something yesterday. I'd like to correct myself. Yesterday I said that, like, there's never been somebody that was guilty of perjury for checking the box that they're a non-citizen. There actually are a handful of people, but a lot of them also had false documents. And it's still only a handful. It's not like numbered in the thousands or millions or anything. And none of them have been in Arizona. But there's only been like 2 or 3 people where they weren't citizens and knowingly checked that box, and that was the entirety of their proof of citizenship. It's extremely rare. And this is over 25 years. So it's not happening. But what will happen is a much larger number of people, possibly in the millions, will be disenfranchised as a result of the SAVE Act if it were to ever pass. If you want to do something to ensure only citizens are voting, take some time and do it right. And do it in a way that's not disenfranchising people. I don't have an issue. I don't think it's something we need to address because it's not happening. But if you want to be double super secure about it, if you want to make sure it's absolutely happening, go ahead, do what you need to do. But do it without making sure that Americans do. While you're doing that, make sure that Americans are also allowed to vote. Don't take away actual citizens' ability to vote on the pretext that non-citizens are voting. And I say that whether that person is going to vote for Trump, vote for somebody else, if they're going to vote for James Talarico, if they're going to vote for Ken Paxton, I don't care. If you're an American citizen, you should be able to vote. And if you're not an American citizen, you shouldn't be able to vote. But nobody is arguing that non-citizens should be able to vote. You got people that are willing to accept that American citizens losing their right to vote is a fair trade-off for this myth that non-citizens vote. The funniest thing that happens in modern America is the fact that the Supreme Court gave itself the power of judicial review. In a sense, that's right. Judicial review is not technically written out, spelled out in the Constitution. But it's not like it happened. I mean, it's been going on since the beginning, and it's like the framers are like, wait, what? What are you talking about? I mean, they clearly didn't object to it. Nothing like nothing in the Constitution gives them that power as decision 1812 that gave them that authority, and no one's ever challenged it, including the people that were still alive that wrote the Constitution. Like nobody said this isn't the case. I'd like to amend my thoughts on my amendment. So is that an amendment? I'd like to amend my thoughts on my amendment, allow individuals to give donations to political campaigns, but severely limit the amount. Whoever gets the most support from individuals gets matching public funding. Wealthy people cannot use their own personal fundings for campaigning. All right, so just off the top of my head, Leslie, I think that's a good idea. What would you say about this? Like, let's say you had to get petitions, right? And there was something that tied the amount of money that you could spend on your campaign to the number of people that signed your petition. And it wouldn't have to be like only those people could give you money. But if you had $1,000 per name, so it's not insubstantial, you'd have to have 500 people. If you had 500 people, you could have raised $500,000. If you had 1,000 people, you could raise $1 million. Like, but you would be capped at that. Like, if you only had 1,000 people, you'd be capped at being able to spend $1 million. If you had 100,000 people, you could spend that much more. And then there'd be a larger cap that would be like, $25 million or so, depending on what the election, something like that. What do you think about that? Like tying your funding to your support and then capping the amount of total funding. This is just off the top of my head. I mean, I might think this through and be like, Kelly, you're an idiot. But off the top of my head, that seems like a reasonable idea. Anyway, I think we should go back to the Iraq issue. I got so tired arguing about that in 2002. I don't think I ever recovered from that. I wonder if, let me see something. I haven't even thought of doing this. Oh, wow. All right. Guess what? I'm going to post a link in here for you, Harry. And I'm sorry you can only see this if you're on YouTube. You can't see it on. But I'm on the Wayback Machine. My blog, my crushbush.blogspot is on the Wayback Machine. So there's the proof that I knew before before Iraq started that it was a bunch of nonsense. Back in 2004. I don't remember. I think I ended up getting a couple of thousand views. It's not like this thing took off. But anyway, there you go. I think it's kind of cool that it's on the. Thank goodness. I'm not like score one for the Wayback Machine. Is that cool or what? Hey, Revival, how are you doing today? What do you think about the citizenship being upheld, birthright citizenship? And so what we're talking about right now, if you could amend the Constitution, you can offer one amendment, like no workarounds like Harry tried where you like have 7 different amendments. You can amend one thing in the Constitution, and it's like a single issue amendment. What would it be? Mine would be ending the Electoral College. I never heard Walter never told me what Pandora's box. I hope I didn't scare off Walter. Walter is a good follower. That sounds workable. Ah, so you like my idea tying it? I think that would be if I mean you don't even need to amend the Constitution to that. I like the idea of making a law about that. Just tying your finances to your support and then limiting how much money can be spent, period. I'm glad. About give me a sec and I'm going to the other stream. Do you mean like the horizontal stream instead of the vertical stream, or do you mean a different stream? Anyway. If you're on YouTube, I have 2 streams. I don't know why they do it this way, but what's sad is the landscape scheme, the one that, like if you're on a computer, the easier one to watch, doesn't have the conversation. So you got to go to the profile screen, the vertical screen, to get the conversation. And that's also sad because I actually get paid more money if you're on the big screen than if on the little screen. But all the engagement's on the little screen. Here, how you doing, Revival? So you like the I actually was surprised that it was that close. I think it's offensive that it was that close, especially by so-called textualists. Like there's any confusion. And what's happened is this whole thing about the subject to the jurisdiction stuff. That was all. I mean, it's just that was if you had diplomatic immunity. If a family had diplomatic immunity, their kids weren't citizens. That's all it said. You're melting. It's so hot and muggy here today. Where are you at? Walter was saying the same thing. He's in Philadelphia. For me, that's just called a day ending in why I live in Texas. In Texas, one time I nearly drowned walking to my car. It gets so humid here some days. Like you need gills to go outside. So I guess, Harry, are you laughing at because I found I hope you can open that. That's pretty good. If you can't, just go to Wayback Machine and search for Crush Bush. That is so cool that's in there. That was like my foray into internet stuff. Oh, listen to Air America Radio. That's hilarious. Boy, Common Dreams. Oh, election projection. So I'm just looking back. There were some wow. Anyway, that's kind of cool. Monday, May 31st, 2004. That's interesting. So I wrote that one on my 5th anniversary. All right. Anyway, nobody even knows what I'm looking at. I was looking at the Blogspot thing. Here, let me do this. This is it. This is my very first independent blog. There was a sports thing that I did named Crush, but all right, that's just one entry. Okay, so that one they didn't. So that's Anyway, I'm getting myself distracted here. But yeah, I started that whole thing to just to argue against the war. Okay. Okay. Oh, here. All right. So, all right. Oh, you're in South Carolina. Oh, goody for you. You get to vote for against Lindsey Graham. I get to vote against Ted Cruz. So muggy. Anyway, my one issue would be the number of representatives shall increase for every 250,000 citizens. Pick Congress like juries. Did you know there was what was the like one of like around Greece? I can't remember the name of it. It was like one of the Greek islands. They had a democracy where it was like a representative democracy, and they would just take different groups of people, like they take like a certain trade, and then they would draw straws. Like if you were a painter and you represented the painters, or if you were a painter, they'd have all the painters draw straws, and the one with the longest straw would represent the painters for 2 years. It was like total. It wasn't an election. It was just like random choosing who got to represent who, and then those people would represent their own industry. That's an interesting idea. Did you see they got rid of the party spending limits in the federal elections? Yes, I was talking about that, and I think it's really, what I find fascinating about that is that this is a direct result of people staying home and not voting because they didn't want to vote for the lesser of two evils. So it's like if Al Gore had won, and if Trump had, if Clinton had won, because people played chess and thought of their end game instead of right now, those justices that made that decision would not currently be sitting on the court. And so now the system which they stayed home to protest is now stronger because they stayed home to protest. So I think there's a certain irony in that. I think both parties, the Republican Party benefited more, but the Democratic Party also represented, the Democrats also benefited. And it's going to make it so that they can do things like contribute to opponents of DSA candidates in primaries. It's going to actually hurt the very movement that you would think that the people that sat things out and refused to participate, and all of that gets worse now because they didn't do it. So play chess, not checkers. I did a whole roller coaster while melting. Happy the citizenship was upheld, but then heard about the election spending. Lindsey Graham will win. It is so red here. I know. It's like, if I were running against Lindsey Graham, I would just play the tape of his speech on January 6th when he was drunk as a skunk and he was accidentally honest. And I would just say, I could get behind this guy. But this isn't who he, the only way you can get Lindsey Graham to say what he really thinks is, to let him open the bottom cabinet of his filing cabinet and pull out the whiskey. That's not known as Santorini. Crete, I believe. Oh, Crete. Yeah, maybe that was at Mesopotamia. I think it was Mesopotamia where they did that. They are all either, but maybe it was Crete. Maybe it was Crete. They are all either disenfranchised to the point of thinking cutting doesn't even matter, or totally brainwashed MAGA idiots, even though the policy changes and cuts hurt them more. Yeah. Sparta had a very interesting system where they elected an unknown number of candidates, and then 5 would be selected at random to serve as policymakers for 1 year. That, I mean, and this is where you're getting back to the origins of democracy. It's interesting, to think about how you could have different ways of doing democracy. Voting, not cutting. Okay, now that makes more sense. You could only hold the office. I couldn't figure out what you meant. So they're staying home because they think their vote doesn't matter, and now their vote doesn't matter. You could only hold, and their vote would have mattered. Like if they had not stayed home, their vote would have mattered. Now, because they stayed home, their vote doesn't matter. You could only hold the office once, and from all the historical sources we have, this usually went to quite poor Spartans, which means it was probably a high number of candidates elected in the initial system. I got the whole argument that the lesser of two, while it's still evil, but it is less evil, so WTF. Yeah, and that's and I mean the thing is, it's not evil. I mean, the lesser of two evils argument kind of overstates what evil means. Like, was Hillary Clinton evil? Was Al Gore evil? Like, what does that mean, evil? Adding, just saying the lesser two evils doesn't necessarily make everything from both parties evil. What is evil about Hillary Clinton? What evil thing was she trying to do? What evil thing was Al Gore? This is more, perfection is the enemy of good. Because you find flaws doesn't make something evil. Because somebody doesn't agree with everything you say doesn't make them evil. It just makes them different. I don't know of any evil thing that Al Gore was for. Or Hillary Clinton. They both had some good things that, and Kamala Harris too. Like, Kamala Harris had real policies that would have really benefited a lot of people, including MAGAs. And one of the ones that I really wish had been more pronounced, because I think MAGAs would have actually benefited from this a lot more, is people that you have what you call sandwich, what is it, sandwich moms or something like that, where you have people that are taking care of both their children and like one or two of their parents at the same time. And because of that, they can't work. And usually these are the moms. These are the women in the household that they stay home. They don't work because they're taking care of the kids, and their parents are getting older and they can't take care of themselves in the same way. So the parents move in, and the moms are taking care of both the kids and the parents. And they could put the parents in nursing homes and have them taken care of. Or they could get in-home care and have, through Medicaid, and have people come over to the house and take care of them. So Kamala Harris was, and they don't need to be medically trained professionals or anything. But Kamala Harris wanted to make it so that these moms could get that paycheck. Like, so if you're taking care of your parents who are staying at home, instead of going through Medicaid and filtering it through that, then you could apply and have and get compensated for what you are doing that is work. And I think, that would have been a big help. And that helps not just with the parents, it helps with like when prices, when you've got inflation and prices going up and stuff like that, that helps pay the household bills. Athens had a very odd system, which is very interesting to look into. That would allow more than just rich, not compromised representatives. I know I would work for my districts for the good people. So we can kind of jump around sometimes on the show when we've got multiple conversations going on. Kimberly's talking about the idea of tying how much money you could spend on a campaign to the amount of support you have. So you couldn't just buy an election. You couldn't just go in and just buy votes. You'd have to like gain support, and then you make your support increase with your funding. So I kind of like that idea. I might have to flesh that one out some more. I kind of like my idea. I don't like all of my ideas, but I like some of them. Harry's got to go. See you, Harry. Have a good afternoon yourself, or evening, I guess. What is it? Well, it's like midnight over there. Bye, Harry. Was Hillary evil? I don't think most people have angel wings, and I don't think most people are evil. I think that there is room between being evil and being, sainted. I feel bad. I don't know. I never could hear, like, I never heard what is actually so bad about Hillary Clinton. Like, I never heard what is so bad about her that was actually, true. Kamala wasn't even good enough to run for governor. Whatever that means, her policy was still good. I like that idea. I like the idea of, independent of who came up with it. I think it's a good policy. Trump, the whole Trump Care thing, or whatever that's called, with the Trump pharmacy plan, and he put his name on it. He put his name on a Democratic idea. The Democrats have been saying that since 2008. They've been trying to get that pushed through. Then Trump just stamps his name on it, and everybody acts like it's his idea. That's okay. I don't care. What I care is that, the policy got passed. I think that we tend to make too much of American politics about persons instead of about things. And you hear me say this on the show a lot. We need to talk about issues, and we need to talk about policies, and less about the people, with the exception of Donald Trump committing crimes and stuff, because that's a really big difference. Oh, my vertical stream isn't working? What happened? Let me check something. That's interesting. I guess I can't fix that. Was it working and then it stopped? It says it's working on YouTube. Let me see something. All right. Oh, it's. Oh, did it drop? Well, that's kind of a bummer. Yeah, it looks like it dropped. Huh. Yeah, I can't try again because. Huh. I can't do anything about that. Oh, it is working. Okay. I just remember the email thing, and people at that one embassy, the vertical stream is working. Try again, maybe. So, all right. So the email thing is a big wet. So what? The thing with the email thing, butter emails, which is funny because the people that flipped out over her emails absolutely had no problem with Donald Trump keeping nuclear secrets in a public bathroom. But let's just ignore all of that. The emails thing, this is, she asked Colin Powell, what do you do? How did you handle this? And then she handled it the exact same way. There was some policy changes that were made that the people that were advising her never told her about. As far as she knew, everything she was doing was fine. And she was doing exactly what Colin Powell had done. And only there was like some changes in the laws that nobody bothered mentioning. And there were no missing emails. You know what? When you send an email, it doesn't just sit on your hard drive. The emails weren't just on her server. Every single email that she communicated with people at the State Department were also on the State Department computer. There were no missing emails. They deleted her personal emails off of her server. And then there were like some that were like later on identified as classified, but they weren't marked classified when they were sent. There were some that said C, and and the Republicans were all like, oh, she doesn't even know C means classified. And C doesn't mean classified. C means confidential. Confidential is not classified. That's why they decided not to charge her with any crimes, because she did not commit any crimes. There was nothing illegal she did with the emails thing. The whole thing with the embassy thing, I lived on a U.S. embassy. If anybody's going to have sympathy, it's the people that lived on the embassy. But she did not do anything wrong with that either. There was Benghazi. There was a thing that happened, and within a few hours, things got out of hand. There was no time to like rush in the military. It was just, all that was is people making hay out of tragedy. Kamala's policy, all she did was have rappers at her rallies twerking and saying orange man bad. No, dude. I know for a fact that's not the case, because I went to her website and looked at her policies. That you don't know her policies or what they were doesn't mean she didn't have them. It just means you didn't know about them. And you didn't have even enough curiosity to see if it was true to go to her website and see if they existed. Don't conflate your ignorance with her not having policies. Stop bragging about being ignorant and thinking that makes you smarter. It makes you dumber. I can tell some people in the chat today watch Fox or Newsmax or whatever. I even, here, I'll see. It's on my YouTube channel. I even did a, let me see if I can find this. Just doing a quick Google search. All right, here. All right, don't want to. But here's a link. This is what her policies were. And I made this before the election. And I even had people, I'll read you. One person came and said, why can't she verbalize this? She did. Makes me think a vote for Harris is a vote for a team that isn't public who's putting together this. And why can't they talk about her policy in any interview? I mean, like, I made the video, and so this guy was saying, how come this isn't known? How come nobody talks about this? How come she doesn't talk about this? And I'm like, how do you think I knew about it? She is talking about it. The press does this thing where they ignore what Democrats say, and they just respond to what Republicans say that Democrats are saying, and then they blame Democrats for not messaging. They ignored her message. They just said her message is what Republicans said it was. No, her. Did you ever watch one of her speeches? Or did you just watch Jesse Waters say what she said? Again, don't conflate your ignorance with what actually happened. That you don't know what happened does not mean it didn't happen. She did explain them. She had policies that she explained very coherently and very cogently and very articulately, but you did not watch the speech. You didn't watch what she had to say. You watched Fox News' rendition of what she had to say. You watched edited stuff. You don't know what she said. That does not mean she didn't say it. I don't even own a TV, but somehow stay more up to date on the news than the majority seem to. It's really amazing how shielded MAGA is from reality. And they Fox News does not actually say things that are real. And the Trump administration is making it even worse. And I'll give you an example. Today, or last night, RFK Jr. was sitting there talking about how they found 1 million people that are on Medicaid that don't have Social Security numbers. And that proves that there are 1 million undocumented people that are getting Medicaid. Which, first of all, it's not Medicaid. It was the Affordable Care Act. Secondly, you can't get Medicaid if you don't have a Social Security number. Thirdly, you can't get ACA if you don't have an income. You do have some people that are here legally that don't have Social Security numbers that can participate in the ACA. And they have income. And they have EIDs instead of Social Security numbers. And then some of those are, there's other reasons that some people are flagged that don't have Social Security numbers. But it doesn't mean there's fraud somehow involved. And of course, Fox News does not clarify that this is all complete horse crap. They just all sit there and nod their head and talk about how terrible it is that all these liberals don't care that all these million illegals aren't coming in here and just taking all our tax dollars. She could. Yes, she could. You don't watch Kamala Harris speak either. Kamala Harris, talking about Kamala Harris not being able to stay on topic when Donald Trump is going on a 20-minute diatribe tangent about Arnold Palmer's penis. Come on, give me a break. You never watched her speech, so how do you know what happened during it? And I know you never watched it, because if you did, you would have seen exactly what you're saying you never saw. No, you never supported her at all, and you never heard of her in 2007. I always like to see, I love the way they invent this history. Code 7. You don't even know who she was before in 2007. Give me a break. You didn't see some video and go, wow, I was a big Kamala Harris fan, and now I just watched this interview, and now I refuse to ever vote for her again. Give me a break. Why do you guys have to lie about stuff? No, you don't get your information from your eyes, because if you did, you'd have to open them. You didn't go to 3 of her. Why are you making stuff up, dude? Why can't you just be honest? Do you think just because you're commenting on a YouTube channel, I have to believe your lies? No, you didn't. never went to her rallies. I always want to see what information people with opposing views are consuming. I tried to balance out. I try to challenge my own perceptions and make sure that I'm not the one. But I also think there are people and channels. There are definitely news industries that are just committed to disinformation. They are not there to act in good faith. And I think that Fox News made it clear with the 2000 election that they have no interest in a good faith argument or in reporting the news in good faith. And we know this not just because of what they reported, but we know this because of what they said about what they were reporting behind closed doors. And once those things became public, we knew they weren't only saying things that they didn't believe. They were saying those things that they didn't believe while mocking the people that believed them. What is it, Tucker Carlson, producer? What did he call them? So Carlson said, I truly can't wait. I hate him passionately about Donald Trump. He said, we are very, very close to being able to ignore Trump most nights. I truly can't wait. I hate him passionately. But then he also said about the MAGA audience, they could easily destroy us if we play it wrong. And his producer, I don't remember the exact quote. I can't find it right off the top of my head. But he called them a bunch of inbred something or other. Hang on. There's a specific thing that's okay. He said, like this talking with MAGA was like negotiating with the terrorists, but especially done ones, cousin fornicating types. He called them cousin fornicators, but he didn't say fornicators. He referred to MAGA as a bunch of cousin fornicating terrorists. All right, yeah. Well, he said he knew it from 2007. Anyway, Coda is clearly not here to discuss things honestly, so Coda is no longer going to be discussing things here. He went to 3. He decided that he wasn't going to follow Kamala Harris anymore in 2007 when she was the AG, but somehow he went to 3 of her rallies anyway. And he went to 3 of her rallies and he doesn't know anything about what her policies were. And he's talking about like I'm on drugs or something, which I'm not. I see you get your information on social media. Yeah, it wasn't nice talking to you, Coda. Bye. I was trying to bring it back to an actual discussion. Yeah, I mean, it's like at a certain, I try to have good faith discussions with people that disagree with me. But once you start lying to me over and over again, like I want, like, I would like to give people the benefit of the doubt when they say things like that. But it's like, there's only like, why is it that every single MAGA knows like 25 people that are lying about SNAP benefit? They're on SNAP and they're making $150,000 a year and they're on SNAP and they're like checking into they're driving their Mercedes to the grocery store and buying soda and lobster or something. And it's like, okay, all these people that are committing felonies and you're not reporting it to the police? Why not? Had to dip out, just got back. Good to see you again. We just had to get rid of a troll, Brett. I thought maybe Coda wrote it awkwardly. Yeah, I mean, I get it. I don't think this is his first experience here either. Um, and it's just, yeah, I've got to try to find a balance to where, I allow people that disagree with me, but like not people that try to hijack the show and just yell things in bad faith that aren't true. Um, and when he starts accusing me of being a drug addict and stuff, that's when I just didn't have any more patience for him. So how long are we going today? We're at 2 hours and 41 minutes. So hey, can I let me see something here? Show you something. So I've been sharing a little bit about my food journey lately. See if I hope this is the right image. So this is a dish I made last night. Does that look good? Can you see it? Let's see if I. Oh, whoops! No, that's not what I wanted to do. This is what I wanted to do. This yesterday. These are what I call burrito brownies. And what they are, believe it or not, I make these brownies out of ground black beans and tough flour. And then instead of oil, I use an avocado. And so because they're made from black beans and avocados, I call them burrito brownies, and they are incredibly good. And then I made this kind of a blackberry or a triple berry topping out of I caramelized some sugar and then added the berries and then put that on top of the ice cream on top of the brownies. So anyway, these are actually healthy brownies with fermented berries topping on them. And they're extremely healthy and they are extremely yummy. So anyway, I know I just trashed RFK Jr., but I like to point out that not everything he says is crazy. I am, again, super processed food. See, how do I get this back? How do I? I'm not good at using this interface is okay. Here, let's see if I can. How do I get off of this thing? Here, remove. Okay. Does that work? Oh, where'd I go? All right, here we go. Sorry. Man. All right, I'm just kind of wandering about with my brain here. I'm kind of new to this. Good rinse, Coda. Then I'm kind of new here, so that was my first time seeing him. Yeah, Brett will tell you. I'm actually Brett. One of the reasons he's a moderator. We used to just get spammed hard by MAGA trolls, and when you can kind of start identifying when they're like, "Oh, I stopped supporting so and so." They repeat all the Fox News talking points, but they don't watch Fox News, and they sit there and they act like they used to be a Democrat, and then they turn Republican and all this stuff, and that you notice a pattern, and it's just like, yeah, you're just a troll. Bye. Kicking trolls is almost a full-time job. I had to unsub from an old friend. We parted ways today. He likes the quantity over the quality. He thinks he can sway bots' minds. I think there are people who can be swayed, but only if they're engaging in good faith. And they're like, we haven't seen Gary since I came back, Brett. Remember Gary, the guy that had the little bus icon? And he was kind of a MAGA. He defended a lot of the MAGA talking points, but he was always polite and he was honest, and he would engage in good faith. And he wouldn't like necessarily agree with much of anything I had to say, much less everything. But I was willing to engage with him because he would talk in good faith. He would debate in good faith. Gary Snell, yeah, that guy. Yeah, I mean, like, you agree with that? Like, he was more or less a MAGA, but he was polite and spoke in good faith, or and interacted in good faith. Sometimes he'd get a little bit annoying because he would just sit there and just keep regurgitating the same talking point after I already addressed him. But I never banned him because he was, he just honestly disagreed, which I'm fine with. But it's like when you get people like this Coda guy, he just had. I think some people, I don't know if they get paid or what, but they walk around and they just go from stream to stream yelling the same stupid talking points. I don't agree with everything you say. I don't even know if I agree with everything I say. My wife doesn't agree with everything I say. And sometimes I change my mind, or I learn something. That's, the way things used to be called learning. And I think that we've gotten to a point in our society where we diminish the value of learning by calling it flip-flopping. People need to be able to discuss things rationally, even when they didn't agree. Yes, and I agree with that. Exactly. I tried to tell this dude it's the same thing every time, the same talking points. Why can't you see it if he can? Why can't you see it? He can. He just wants high viewership. Stars in the eyes. I had to say I'm done. I will say, when the trolls were coming, I had about 10 times as many viewers. I mean, I'd have streams that would get like 50,000 viewers. But one thing I noticed is a lot of them were just, in and out. They weren't real viewers. And I wasn't able to have real conversations with real people. And it might have helped more with the money part of things, which is, you want to get paid, but I want to have integrity too. It's okay to not always agree with yourself. People learn and grow as individuals, and people change their mind, especially when new information is brought to their attention. And when, like with Plattner, the Maine Senate candidate, he's, without getting into the tattoo thing, which I think is more hay being made than than is there, because it's not like he's got this long history of Nazi statements or anything, but he has said things that are problematic in the past. I think the most problematic thing I've seen that he said was why don't black people tip, that's a racist statement, but he admits it was stupid, and he said he learned from it, and it was like some number of years ago. And it's like, what's the point of discourse if you don't allow people to learn and change? And like, why would I even have a stream if I didn't want to change people's minds? So if that's the case, how can you hold it against people what they used to say if they've changed their mind, if they've learned something? Like, I'm fine with that. I'd rather have a guy that used to be right-wing and learned their lesson and became left-wing than a person pretending to be left-wing and secretly supporting right-wing stuff like John Fetterman or Kristen Sinema. Attacking real Americans deserves zero voice, especially when their opening line is libtard. There are certain words, like when they say libtard, that's a, they're not going to be worth talking to. When they bring up George Soros, that one. When just out of nowhere, they start talking about what's a woman? Oh, do you for men and women's sports? It's like, that's not the only issue. Uh, I'm not so worried about men and women's sports that I think that, women not being able to choose their own health care is on the same level. I think that's a little bit more important. And by the way, I don't actually have a problem with trans women in sports, but that's another story. I don't agree. Like, I'm fine with that, but I understand why some people have issues with it. I just don't think that's the most critical issue facing our country right now. I don't even think it's in the top 1,000. I just think that it easily solicits hate and summons hate, and that makes it, instead of trying to understand the issue and understand people, it just makes people easy to have something to yell and scream and holler about. I think most people know how deep down who is a bot and who is unchangeable. Yeah, and I think you use bot and troll interchangeably. I think like trolls, there are real people behind the accounts that just have no interest in engaging in a real conversation. Oh yeah, yeah. TDS. I call it Trump's Tourette's, like, or MAGA Tourette's, where it's just like they just shout out talking points that have nothing at all to do with what you're talking about. But Biden. I've seen people really hung up on that. Yeah, TDS is. They even had a guy try to make it like a law or something. Trump derangement syndrome, and the guy that wanted to make TDS illegal ended up getting busted for being a pedophile. And I'm not even, like, I'm not. They also like to just accuse everybody of being a pedophile who disagrees with them. And I see people on the left do that too. It's like, as a child who was molested, can I just ask everybody to back away from using that as as an attack? It diminishes sexual assault of children when you use it as as an attack for people on social media. Like, I think there's a very real possibility that Donald Trump raped girls. Like, I'm not talking about not using it when it's applicable, but when you just start calling everybody that disagrees with you a pedophile, it actually diminishes pedophilia and the seriousness of it. So anyway, I don't like it when people do that on the right or the left. But you definitely see people on the right do it every time. I've been accused of being a pedophile because I don't support Trump, which is just ironic as all hell. I never see it until I hit send. Been there. Derangement. Real American. So if I don't drink Budweiser and drive an F-150, I'm not aware. I never understood what real American is supposed to be. I never understood that. What do they mean by a real Americans? Because if I didn't know any better, if you were to just, take the context, and you were to just, if you were to take just a blank space and put it in place of real Americans, and like Fox News programming and all of that kind of stuff, if you were to just put a blank line in there, and then you were to ask me what goes in that space, I'd just say white conservatives. That would fit every single one of their every time they use the words real Americans, if you were to just replace it with white conservatives, it would mean exactly the same thing. Like, I'm a real American. I'm a real person. I have arms, legs, a brain, eyes, and I'm an American. I was born in America, which, as of today, we know it has been affirmed, makes me an American. So I'm a real American. But somehow, whenever they talk about what real Americans want, they never talk about what I want. I'm just at the point where I've seen TDS typed so many times. Apparently, other people aren't. It's just not MAGA Tourette's. That's all it is at this point. It's not even. It is. When they say TDS, they've lost the argument. When they say George Soros, they've lost the arguments. When they say but Biden, they've lost the argument. When they say George Soros, they've lost the argument. All of these things are just ways to transition out of the argument instead of engage in one. I swear my phone has auto incorrect. Revival, I have an idea for an app where it's like you'd connect your car to your Bluetooth and then it could diagnose your car. And it would always give you the wrong diagnosis. And I'll call it autocorrect. What do you think? It's actually harder to spell Kamalala than Kamala. So they go out of their way to look extra stupid just to mispronounce the name on purpose. Yes, they tried to make it seem like, and it was all. I mean, let's face it. Mispronouncing her name was racist. Like, they'll never admit that, but it was. It was a deliberate attempt. She has a non-traditional name with an origin from another country, and they did the same thing with Barack Hussein Obama. That's racist. Like, just because you don't admit something's racist or that it's racist, racially motivated, doesn't mean it's not racist. It just means you're coding it. It's like I was saying with states' rights. Like, talking about states' rights is no different than saying Barack Hussein Obama. It's all coded racist language. I do miss the real American hero Bud Light commercials, though. I liked the ones with the frogs. I thought those were cute. The Bud Wise, or like, do you remember the frogs that would ribbit Budweiser? So here's the thing. This is funny. Bud Light is, as a beer aficionado, Brett will tell you, Bud Light is not the best beer. And so what happened is in the World Cup in Boston, the Scottish fans, who apparently like beer a lot, were like they loved Sam Adams. Like, they just couldn't find Sam Adams in Boston because it was they drank it all. And then they drank all the other beer. The only beer they wouldn't drink, the only beer you could get, was Bud Light. I think that's hilarious. It's like, this beer is so bad, even a Scotsman won't drink it. Like, that should be a saying. The Labla is them screaming with their finger in their ears. Brett laughs, skulls. Okay. You're killing me with the autocorrect app. Wouldn't I love it. I think we should do that. Thank goodness I'm asking, because I crapped up laughing entirely too much over that one. My autocorrect goes nuts when I use voice to text. Don't trend on Snake. Did you I think you'll get a kick out of this. Did you know the one of the people that died on January 6th had a Gadsden flag? Like the "Don't tread on me." And I just wonder, like, if her last words were, "Read my flag." And I'm sorry if that's cruel, but it's funny. All right, Like she was literally trampled to death holding a Gadsden flag. That I don't know if it's funny, but it's ironic as hell. All right. So we just hit 3 hours. Yeah. I think that's the appropriate reaction to that. Um anyway, we're at 3 hours, so I'm gonna end it here. I hope you guys have a nice evening. And thanks for sticking with me. Read my flag. Anyway, the last 20 minutes were a waste of time, but at least we got some laughs. All right, I'll see you guys in the see you guys tomorrow. I'll try to log on around 2 o'clock. Hope you have a good one, and go American citizens.